What if everything you think is real, matter, energy, space itself, isn't actually the most fundamental thing in the universe? Today, we're digging into a wild framework that says the true building block of all reality is pure information. Yeah. Let's see how this one idea can totally flip our understanding of everything, and it all starts with the concept of infinity. When we think about infinity, we usually picture something that just keeps going, like counting and never ever stopping. But what if that's just scratching the surface? What if infinity isn't just a number, but a fundamental feature of reality's actual architecture? All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to completely redefine what we mean by infinity. Then we'll dive straight into the core idea, that information is literally the foundation of everything. After that, we'll see how you can build a whole universe from that information, check out the rules that make it all tick, and then, finally, figure out where we fit into this gigantic cosmic picture. Okay, so before we can even begin to talk about a universe made of information, we have to seriously upgrade our definition of infinity. It's not just one thing. Turns out it's more like a whole family of ideas, and each one describes a totally different kind of endless. So on one hand, you've got potential infinity. This is the one we're all familiar with, right? It's a process, something that happens over time, like counting to 1,000,000,000 and just keeping going. But then you have something way deeper, existential infinity. Think about the game of chess. The complete set of every single possible move and every possible game already exists as a kind of mathematical reality. It's a structural fact, whether anyone ever plays those games or not. It's not a process. It's a complete, boundless system that just is all at once. And believe it or not, there are even more types. You've got logical infinity, which just kind of pops out of math, like the fact there's an infinite number of numbers between 0 and 1. Then there's combinatorial infinity, which is for systems so ridiculously complex that the total number of possibilities is just beyond what could ever be observed. The main thing to get here is that infinity isn't just about more and more. It's a deep structural part of how reality is put together. Okay, so we've stretched our minds around infinity. Now let's get to the absolute core of this whole framework. And this, my friends, is where things get really, really weird. There it is, the big one. According to this idea, everything, every particle, every star, you, me, this whole universe isn't made of stuff. It's made of pure information. Matter and energy, they're just the results of how that information is arranged and how it behaves. So, if information is the bedrock, then what about space and time? Where do they fit in? Well, the fundamental qualia axiom gives us a completely radical answer. Qualia just means the basic qualities of a thing. And this axiom says that space and time aren't the box that the universe sits in. Nope, they are fundamental properties of information, just like redness is a property of a strawberry. Let's break that down, because it's a big idea. Time in this model is simply the rhythm, the beat, the pulse of information occurring. And space, that's just the quality of information that allows different pieces of it to exist at the same time, to be separate from each other. It's not an empty void. It's a relationship between information. Okay, so if reality is just information, what does it actually look like? What's the blueprint? Let's explore its architecture. To map this all out, the framework uses a few key concepts. Think of rank as the outer boundary of a system. Dimension is like the coordinate grid inside that boundary. And extent is how much of that grid a specific piece of information takes up. These are basically the architectural plans for building an existence. Now for the really cool part. We can actually watch our familiar dimensions just emerge from these principles. Let's start from absolute zero. Everything kicks off with what's called a radix. It's a zero-dimensional, single point of pure information. It's got a location, but no size. It just is. All right, now connect two of those points. What do you get? Array. And just like that, you have a one-dimensional line. You've literally created length out of nothing but the relationship between 2 points of information. Now add a third point, but not on that line. You've just created a plane. Now your information has 2 degrees of freedom. You can move up, down, and left, right. You've got a surface. And finally, you add a fourth point outside of that plane, and bam, you get volume. Information can now occupy 3-dimensional space. We just built the very space we experience every single day, not from an empty void, but from pure, structured information. How wild is that? So we have the blueprint, we have the architecture.
But reality isn't a static photograph, right? It's a movie. It's dynamic. So how does all this information actually interact? What are the physics of an informational universe?
Well, it breaks down into three main categories. You can think of operators like the nouns. They're the properties that describe a piece of information like its shape or how much of it there is. Transformations are the verbs. They're the actions that can change information, like rotating it or making it bigger. And symmetries are like the grammar, the deep underlying rules about position and alignment that make sure the whole system plays fair. Put them all together, and you've got the engine that makes reality go.
Okay, this brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, and maybe the most profound one. If this whole information structure is so mind-bogglingly vast, where do we fit in? You know, as little finite beings trying to make sense of it all? The framework has a name for this, the observer inferiority condition. It's a powerful idea. It basically says that our own limits, our biology, our intelligence, create a natural boundary. There is a reality that exists beyond this boundary that we are literally incapable of processing. So let's be super clear about what this means. The universe, in all its infinite informational glory, is real and totally valid, whether we're here to observe it or not. Our science, our math, our very consciousness, they are amazing tools, but they operate inside a little bubble of what we can comprehend. And here's the kicker. Just because something is outside our bubble, totally inaccessible to us, that doesn't make it any less real.
And that leaves us with a pretty staggering final thought. If this is right, it suggests that the reality we see and measure is just one slice of a much, much larger informational pie. The slice our brains happen to be wired to understand. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other unimaginable complexities, what other kinds of existence are out there, lying just beyond the edge of what we can even think about?